It was a Friday afternoon at my house, and I was getting ready to go hang out with some friends. My mood and mindset were fairly normal at the time. I took 2 hits of the DOC. One was a Playboy bunny, the other a white lightning bolt on a red background, at approximately 2 p.m. I had nothing to do until 5, knowing it wouldn't kick in until around then, so I sat around on the computer. At about 5, I had to eat dinner with my mom and sister. I was starting to feel really up, like a balloon was in my chest and clothespins on my cheeks, so I couldn't stop smiling. As I sat down, the light from the ceiling was reflecting on the silverware and right into my dilated pupils. This was fantastic. The light had shades of purples, greens, and yellows, which was a theme throughout the trip. I made it through dinner okay. I knew my mom and sister knew, but I was past the point of caring. I went up to my room and had some people over. The evening began with some smoking and hanging out on my roof. I smoked 2 or 3 gravity bong bowls and I was in the land. As I was sitting on my roof, the sky was purple and green and the street was oddly colored and moving. I went back inside and sat on my bed. My buddies asked me throughout, "How you feeling, man?" To which I replied, "Holy shit, dude," or I couldn't answer at all. A little while later, I basically blacked out. I went out of my body and saw myself sitting on my bed, and everything kept zooming out. I was drawing at the time, but I was watching myself from up in the stars. At one point, I witnessed 2 stars collide in a different galaxy of some sort. This scared the crap out of me, and I think that's when things started going downhill. My friends started to leave, and when I sort of regained consciousness, I ran out the door because I really wanted to go with them. I'm not sure what happened next, but I ended up back at my house. Next thing I know, I'm standing in front of my mom's room, and she's looking at me weird. I couldn't remember the past 5 minutes or more. My sister was yelling at me because apparently I'd spilled instant coffee all over the doormat. So I went down in the basement trying to escape all the madness. I went on my computer and couldn't even log on, I was tripping so hard. The whole time there were magnificent yellows, greens, and purples in my peripheral vision, and things were very acid-like. It was kind of like acid on crack. Anyway, I honestly don't remember what happens next, but this shit made me sweat like a beast, so I ended up naked. While naked, I guess I ran downstairs. By this point, my mom and sister knew what was up, so I guess they tried to restrain me. I hit my sister in the chest and tackled my mom and bit the shit out of her leg. I had no idea what was going on. My mom called the cops, and this is where shit gets raw. So next thing I know, I'm on the ground, still naked. My hands are behind me and I can't move them. I start yelling and screaming, and I was told later that I tried to jump off the balcony to kill myself, which is stupid because it's only 1 story, and 7 fucking pigs are on top of me. Now take this in for a second. 7 full-grown male and female police officers taking on a 130-pound 15-year-old kid tripping out of his mind. I assume I fought them off for a little bit, but I was told they were about to taser me, and I gave up. The next part of the story is the ambulance and hospital, which I'm going to go over very briefly. Basically, I was rambling crazy ramblings in the ambulance and freaking out. They were recorded and read back to me in family court. So in the hospital, they strapped me to a chair, and this lady nurse was about to give me a catheter. I was still tripping really hard and thought I was on a game show, had won, and was about to have sex with this sexy nurse. Boy, was I wrong. I won't go into details, but they ended up giving me a sedative and throwing me in the PICU. The next day, I woke up with 2 broken wrists and bruises all over my face, back, arms, and legs. My mom has the nerve to show up with a picture of the bite I gave her and was rubbing it in my face as if I didn't feel bad enough. I was still tripping in the PICU the next day. I couldn't tell right away, but later I realized the clock was kind of melting and was green, yellow, and purple. I spent the next 3 days in the psych ward. To sum it all up, this was a crazy fucking trip. My first mistake was taking it at around 2 p.m. I should have done it at about 5. Second mistake was doing it at home. Bad idea. Well, what's done is done and can't be undone. I must say I doubt I will ever do DOC again. This is an intense drug and should be dealt with carefully. The experience that my boyfriend and I had on DOC was so awful overall that I feel the need to preface this report by saying that we are not anti-drug crusaders by any means, but also that I am not making any of this up. Perhaps some of you will laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of this and consider us incredibly stupid, but I hope that you may be able to avoid such an awful experience. Don't mix this stuff with psych meds. I am not sure of the dosage, except that each of us took 2 hits of white blotter paper each of what our friends told us was DOC, and that it was a 16-hour trip. Being moderately experienced with LSD and meth myself for a decade now, I figured I could handle this easily. Also, I've been taking antidepressants off and on for about 10 years to combat my bipolar disorder, which I've had since I was very young, definitely pre-drugs, and I've usually mixed my psych meds with drugs, with either deadening effects, i.e. MDMA, I feel nothing, or either very mild euphoria, or pleasant happiness-enhancing effects, i.e. with LSD, Zoloft or Paxil and acid together, for example, meant I never had a bad trip, and everything was just much more colorful. My boyfriend had never tripped before, but since our friend said this was a weak dose, we each took 2 hits. He takes Tegretol, an anti-seizure medication. I take Lamictal, an anti-seizure med/mood stabilizer, which I never mixed with psychedelics before. Perhaps this was the random factor making this the first bad trip I had ever had. We each took 2 hits at about midnight. I felt the effects immediately. Very strong, fractal, colorful visuals. Every poster on my wall was 3D, and the walls and ceiling were breathing and turning colors. I was enjoying it. My boyfriend began shaking all over immediately and became very disoriented and refused to be left alone, not common for him. The visuals kept peaking and peaking. I sat on the porch alone smoking a cigarette, and in the dark, I closed my eyes and saw bright, rainbow, almost flaming colored visuals even with my eyes closed, as if tendrils and wrought iron patterns were growing and spiraling. It was very nice, almost peaceful, but with an increasing edginess and uneasiness. The trip kept peaking and peaking. I might have enjoyed this if at a festival, in a large open space with no cars and lots of people to help me calm down and come down. No such luck. Just my boyfriend and I in our apartment, both of us too fucked up to drive and nowhere to go. And by the time the psychosis hit, it was too early for any of our friends to come pick us up or come talk us down, or even shove the many Xanaxes down our throats that we really should have taken. Around 7 a.m., the psychosis hit full on. Boyfriend initially was even worse than me, going into full-blown panic, making me even worse. I remember sitting in the dark in front of my computer, trying to type, and feeling like I was in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disney World, with leering corpses hanging out of the walls and ceiling, surrounding me. It was awful. I had to get outside. I felt like I was in a time loop. I remember it being 5:23 a.m. for hours. Also, my thoughts began looping and growing more and more irrational. I began yelling and repeating myself, just blurting out random numbers and garbage. Trigonometry is the answer to everything, 521, etc., etc. Then I began throwing things and breaking things, with the thought of, do what thou wilt. All I have to do is say the magic words and all my dishes and glasses will magically repair themselves. All reason disappeared. Books and candles went everywhere, one through my window. I went outside and began throwing flower pots. Then, upon seeing passing cars, I would run up to them, wave them down, knock on their windows, and began hurling slurs or insults at the people inside. I then laid in the middle of the road, thinking, so what if I get hit? My boyfriend began freaking out. Help was nowhere to be found. He called 911 on his cell phone. Stupid? Perhaps. But if he hadn't, I could have gotten run over or probably had the shit beat out of me by someone in one of these cars that I was flagging down and calling names. The cops came. I walked up to the cop and called him a pussy, among other names, and asked him for a cigarette. He thought I was being aggressive, so he pepper sprayed me and handcuffed me. Both of us, me and my boyfriend, got to ride in the ambulance to the hospital, where the ER staff strapped me down to a bed for 8 hours after pumping me full of Haldol. About 5 p.m. that day, I woke up and we were released. I was still feeling the drug and seeing the colors and pulsating light. The next day, around 5 p.m., I had a dystonic reaction, i.e. a seizure, from the Haldol, where my jaw locked up and my head rolled back and I couldn't move it. I found out the hard way I am allergic to Haldol. To top it all off, we ended up with a couple of charges from the snafu and got to go to jail too. We didn't go the same day, but turned ourselves in about 2 weeks later on our lawyer's advice. To sum it up, this one trip is costing us, so far, around $10,000 in legal fees, bail bond, and medical bills. I call it DOC for Department of Corrections. Needless to say, I'll never touch this stuff again for as long as I live. In fact, I'm not really in the mood to do any drugs anymore, period. I am not trying to scare you, but you just need to know this ain't your parents' happy drug.